Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched, where this week I watched Spotlight from 2015. This is a movie that has, like so many others, I should almost stop saying it at this point, been on my list for quite a long time. But the primary reason I haven't watched it for up until now is because it deals with some very heavy subject matter that I wasn't sure I was ready to you got to be in a certain steeled emotional mood to deal with. So I had avoided it for a while, and even when it first came out, which was about the time I had originally thought about watching it, that had been my feeling. Now it's been quite a few years since it released, but it's interesting to reflect on that specifically because it is hard not to draw some comparisons, loose comparisons, to The Big Short, which is another biographical sort of contemporary history drama film that released the same year. I'm not exactly sure how far apart they released, but they were very close, to the point that it was constantly in the back of my head of like, these could be equally good movies, but one of them is frankly more palatable and more conceptually interesting than the other. So when dealing with some heavy subject matter, I think it's understandable that this movie did not perform quite as well as that one did. That said, by all accounts, this did do quite well, and I had actually forgotten that it had won Best Picture, I believe, at that year's Academy Awards, and I think probably rightly so. This is still not the easiest movie to watch, to be sure, but it does do a very careful job of presenting the content matter that it intends to present in a way that is both not hiding anything and not softballing it, but also does not at any point feel grotesque or exploitative or anything like that, which I think it easily could have, even if it was unintended. For context, and I'm going to dance around this a little bit for the sake of getting filtered, is that this is about the team at the Boston Globe in 2001, and I think a little bit before that uncovered basically a systemic history of covering up of abuses by priests within the Catholic Church, and specifically around Boston, of young members of their congregation. And that it had gone back for, at that point, decades. It also brings up the fact that this historically was about the same time of September 11th, and how the impact of that event was so all-encompassing in the news world that even though this was big news, it was still relatively it did not get the explosive sort of reporting that it might have otherwise, had there not been other things going on, essentially. Although, as I understand it, after that, I believe they leave a thing at the end of the film where they say that this was a series of reports that went on for many, many years after that it was a continued investigation, etc. So that's interesting to know. This is not a subject I knew very much about, and it's good to see. I mean, however you get information about the world, as long as it's reasonably accurate to reality, I think is a good thing. Even if those are, especially when it comes to dark subject matter and things that can be kind of unpalatable, I could see how reading this in the newspaper would, as it was happening, would be a lot more dour and hard to digest than finding out about it via a movie. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. This was made 14 years after the events therein, and like I said, I think it does a really solid job of presenting things without sugarcoating it, and also without being at any point too awful about it. This could definitely have been a movie that is extremely depressing. And frankly, the content of, obviously the content of the reality that caused these events that actually happened are incredibly depressing. And they don't hide that fact, but the framing and the tone, the care that's done with the tone in this movie is very specific to ensure that sort of the importance and the significance is on display, but it is not trying to shame the viewer for knowing or not knowing, or for it is not a moralizing story, and it is also not one that focuses. It is very focused on the. It's very focused on the journalists, but it does not frame them as like magically heroic in any way. It's very practical in its framework. It also doesn't do the thing The Big Short does. It doesn't try and be overly entertaining. And I really do like The Big Short, but there's a lot of spectacle going on. It is very much it's a pretty good educational tool, but it's more there for the entertainment value than it is for the like historical, biographical kind of content. This is much more the latter. It is, by all accounts, fairly historically accurate. I think there are some minor changes that got some people in a huff, but even by all accounts, allegedly the Catholic Church thought it was a good movie and recommended it. So, this is, like I said, tricky subject matter, but I think it's really interesting to watch this film as it very carefully unpacks sort of the way that any institution that is sufficiently culturally ingrained in a society, in a whether that's a whole country, a state, a city, whatever, can have an inordinate amount of power via its social placement to influence the behavior of people indirectly, where the misbehavior of members of that community can be so indirectly socially pressured to just keep things quiet or let things go, or hide the dark parts, because the act of speaking out against basically what's become so socially normal, culturally normal, that it's considered part of the society directly, can lead people to just overlook things. Even they do a very good job of showing the nuance of a lot of different people in a lot of different positions, and how even decent people who meant the best and would never have tolerated the things, knowing these things, indirectly or even subconsciously suppressed their knowledge or understanding of the things that were going on, because it was the social norm that everybody sort of had this unspoken set of understandings that, that it's the kind of thing where it's like, that person's just weird, just don't worry about it or whatever. And everybody just, as a society, starts to sweep things under the rug. And how far that can go, that it can go for entire cities, or truly, in this case, the entire world. As they report right at the end, they're like, yeah, here's a list of cities worldwide where they ended up uncovering additional, scandals of the same vein. that you know, it can become awful things can become very normalized. And that inordinate amount of power and influence over everyone at every level is fascinating to unpack in a very darkly interesting way. They do not, like I said, sugarcoat this at all. They do not hide. They pretty directly talk about the abuses that were suffered and the things that happened to a couple of, at least in the story, minor characters, basically survivors of the abuses. And one of the things I think it does best, it's very hard in any movie where it is mostly just, a series of scenes. It's 2 hours of people talking, basically, to have a lot of, how would we put this? Social nuance, I guess. They do an extraordinary job of they have a lot of there's a lot of characters at various levels. There's a lot sort of at the stars are all doing very well, but they also have a lot of minor characters who only have a scene or even only a few lines, who perform just wonderful performances of deep emotional vulnerability in a variety of ways. This is not just, of course, some of the most striking ones are the survivors talking about their experiences. But the same goes kind of across the board, that there are a lot of very strong emotions of all different kinds being flung around in this film. And any of them could easily have come off as insincere or overblown or even cheesy. And there was not one performance in this film that I thought that was the case. It keeps a very careful handle on its tone and pace to get you to understand both the sense of urgency and the sense of seriousness, but also the sense of like sort of commitment and hopefulness that goes along with it. That this newsroom is really driven by a commitment to their journalistic integrity and the importance of the truth and justice, and the ups and downs of how that impacts them as a group and as individuals, how having to understand horrible things that they themselves did not experience, but may have been, aware, indirectly aware of. And now that they are having to hear many, many people tell all their horrible stories, that's an incredible amount of like psychological fortitude you have to have just for that. But really, this is the movie is a lot about sort of this tension between commitment to do the right thing, to do good work, to report important things in the best of your capability, while also being often overwhelmed in a variety of different ways by the magnitude of the injustice that you're having to investigate and report. The level of evil, if you will, and the level of negligence across all different stripes of life to allow this to happen, and to happen for so long, and to be continually facilitated actively for so long. All of the actors do a really good job. There's a lot of great sort of often not lead actors in a lot of things, but notable character actors and things like that. Mark Ruffalo, I don't know if we've talked about Mark Ruffalo before on the show. I feel like we have. I do think he's sort of a little bit underrated. I don't think he's an amazing, like greatly, I don't think he has a huge wide range of skills, but he definitely has more nuance and care. He has more care in his acting than I think he is sometimes given credit for. And especially, frankly, I think his career has been done some disservice by his role in the MCU, because that is now largely what he is associated with, when I think he has a lot of finesse in his acting that leads to really serious roles that he performs really well. Michael Keaton is sort of a lot. Michael Keaton's an interesting one because he's had a long career with a variety of different roles, and has in many ways had a similar career trajectory to Ruffalo, but in sort of the opposite order. It's weird how he went from DC to Marvel, but anyway, he's also an actor I think is very talented and I like quite a lot. Rachel McAdams, she's often in a lot of, or used to be in a lot of sort of comedies and romantic films, and I think she does have more acting chops than she's given credit for. Stanley Tucci as well. Man, I almost forgot he was in this film because he is such a chameleon. Stanley Tucci is definitely, I don't remember if we've talked about him either, but he's very much an underappreciated gem, or I think people really appreciate him a lot. I think people know he's a decent actor, and he seems to be a very nice man, but he's also just in a lot. I see him in a lot of things and go, oh man, yeah, that's Stanley Tucci. I kind of didn't recognize him, especially in the last like 10 years. He's sort of adopted a particular appearance pretty consistently, and he often has that exact same appearance in movies. So having him be in roles where he's been sort of gotten the hair and makeup and costuming, so he isn't as apparently and not the same glasses that he always wears, that he isn't as apparently Stanley Tucci. He's really a chameleon and a very talented actor who I think has some great performances in this film, some outstanding ones. The only person who I don't know, I can't even put my finger on it. I was trying to think about it. There's nothing wrong with Liev Schreiber's performance. It's fine. There's just something about him in the role that feels off. Part of that is he is inherently his character in the I was going to say lore, in the context of the movie, is already an outsider. So maybe it's just that, but something about his performance, it's not bad. It's just, for some reason, it just doesn't seem quite right to me. And I'm sorry that I can't put my finger on it more. He just seems a little uncomfortable, or something. He's fine though. He doesn't have a huge number of scenes, and they're not like terrible or anything. Just didn't seem quite right. There's tons and tons of other actors in here, both some recognizable faces from movies and TV, character actors, and then some people I've never seen before who I don't know if they have much of a history outside of this movie either. So credit to pretty much everything. Like I said, pretty much everyone put on really excellent performances, even if they only have a minute or two on screen. I was very, very impressed with the consistency. Kind of in a similar vein, this is written and directed by Tom McCarthy, as well as co-written by Josh Singer. I don't really know either of them. I quickly skimmed their stuff, and I don't really know any of their prior work. It looks like Josh Singer was at one point a writer on The West Wing, which kind of makes sense with some of the writing that's done, because the writing's the dialogue writing in here is very good. But neither of them have particular a lot of credits to their name. I will say, I think the dialogue is quite good. I will say that when it comes to Hollywood, it's a little bit under Hollywoodized, which sounds like something I would normally not complain about. And it's not really a complaint. It's just kind of surprising that to see in contrast to what Hollywood usually does. Even relatively grounded Hollywood movies have a level of overacting to them very often, and overly snappy dialogue writing that can be, it adds to an unreality of the movies. And to see a movie that is so grounded in its writing, and very rarely does anything purely for the drama or for the impact of a sentence or a line or whatever. It is very careful and very grounded in a surprising way that makes me a little bit surprised actually that this was a Hollywood release instead of a miniseries. I guess miniseries were not as popular in 2015 as they are now, but or like an HBO movie or something like that. This feels like the kind of thing that could have fallen into that category. There was that other, I forgot about that. We long ago we watched Bad Education, which I think was a Hollywood, or I think was an HBO, like another biographical sort of drama film. And that one was not, as I recall, it was not particularly good. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. My point is that this is the writing is very careful, very subdued, and not very flashy. And largely that is a good thing. I think it does, it is a choice that one has to make when writing for the big screen, that when you're already dealing, maybe that was the decision, that was, we're already dealing with subject matter that is hard and difficult to palate. So if people are already willing to buy the ticket knowing that this is, about that, then we don't have to do the Hollywood thing, because we've already, the type of people who would be interested are already okay with it not being flashy Hollywood, heroic type stuff. The one other movie I kind of compared this to was, in my head, was Zodiac, which is a little unfair, especially from me, because I really do like David Fincher quite a lot. And this is a very visually grounded movie as well. Whereas Zodiac and everything David Fincher does is not flashy, but it's very stylized. He has a very specific directorial and cinematic eye. So this is very much the opposite of that, and it's not really fair for me to compare it to The Big Short or Zodiac, but some of the parallel lines, thematic lines, and stuff about history and journalism and that sort of thing, it's hard not to draw some of those comparisons, even when they're really, I hate the phrase apples and oranges, but you know what I mean. So again, I'm going to say ups and downs on the visual style of this movie. It is a very not flashy movie. It's a little bit desaturated, I would say. I would actually actively ding it for that. That the color grading is a little bit desaturated and brown. It's not, glaring. It's just, they didn't have to desaturate it quite that much. So that was a little bit visually disappointing. But the rest of it is really cinematography-wise, this is a very unflashy, very practically shot film. There are a few shots here and there that I think are nicely done, a few transitions that are interesting, and wide pans and things that are nice, but it's definitely not trying in any way to show off when it comes to its cinematography. And again, for the subject matter and the tone that it keeps, I think that's probably quite appropriate. It would have felt out of tone for it to show off in any way. Yeah, the rest of this movie is it's really just very solid all around. It's hard, right, comparing this to other Hollywood films because it is so not Hollywood feeling in so many ways. It is hard to compare it directly to anything else in a way that feels fair. Like, ultimately, I would say I enjoy both Zodiac and The Big Short more than this film. But for what it's going for the specific niche that this is going for, this is a pretty extraordinary film. I have basically no criticisms of it, other than, minor stylistic things. I just think it's really, really solid and takes a really careful look at sensitive subject matter. I'm very impressed by it. I am surprised, but I can understand why it won Best Picture. And I definitely think that it's definitely, if you're up for the subject matter and for a very, serious and non-flashy film, it's very, very good. I don't think you have to be, quote unquote, in the mood for it. I think I was, as I often am, overly careful about my emotional state going into it. But I mean, it's some really, really touchy subject matter. So as long as you're sort of like aware and okay with that, I think you'll be fine. Yeah, I'm very impressed. I'm glad I finally got around to watching it. It's just very rock solid. No complaints. Anyway, thank you for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched, and I'll see you for something different next time.